Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're talking about adult ADHD. So ADHD can affect behavior, cognition, and mood with things like hyperactivity, impulsivity, forgetfulness, or racing thoughts. For some, there may be a lack of restraint and increased risk-taking behaviors. This can look like a low sense of self-preservation or just making risky financial moves and things like that. So it's estimated that about 3 million US citizens are diagnosed with ADHD per year. A lot of us were diagnosed as children, but more and more adults are being diagnosed, even senior citizens. This is largely due to a common misconception that only children are affected by ADHD. This is just not true. So we used to think that you could just grow out of ADHD. We know now that it's just something that is lifelong. Perhaps it affected you more as a child when you were in a school setting and you've learned how to compensate for your differences, but that doesn't mean that it went away. And similarly, you can't just develop ADHD. Maybe it didn't really present such a problem in your childhood, and as the pressures of adulthood set in, perhaps your symptoms just became more prevalent. But the bottom line is that you have to be born with it. If you had it, you will always have it. It will always be there. And there was even debate in recent years about if ADHD or ADD even exists, but it does. There was also question as to whether or not there really is a genetic component. We now know that ADHD is largely genetic. Scientists have actually been able to isolate the ADHD gene. ADHD is as genetic as height. We also have the ability to hyperfocus. This is both a blessing and a curse. We may not be able to focus very well in a school or work environment if we're not interested in what we're doing.
This is Luna. You haven't seen her yet. She kind of hates people. Look at that resting bee face. I love her though. She's a sweet one when she wants to be.
But things that we are interested in doing, the things that are going to give us that big dopamine hit, those are the things that we can hyper-focus on. So we have attention deficits in some areas, and in other areas we hyper-focus and we have great attention. This hyper-focus could last for hours, days, weeks, where it's the only thing that we want to do and focus on, and the focus is intense. Now, a downfall is that we generally have poor executive functioning skills. I've talked about this in previous videos, but this is things like not being able to execute long-term goals. It can affect our working memory and our ability to multitask, setting and keeping appointments, and to manage our time. Now, as children, we may have been seen as gifted or spirited, but then asked why we cannot just apply ourselves. I know that like 100% of my progress reports in school all said she has so much potential if she would just apply herself. She has so much potential, but she just keeps getting distracted and distracting the class. She has so much potential if she could only focus. If that sounds familiar to you, you might be ADHD. So there's sort of a brain-body disconnect when it comes to ADHD, and similarly with autism. And so it can be hard for us to identify what our roadblock is. So sometimes what happens is people tell us that we're lazy or unmotivated or forgetful or irresponsible, stubborn, and even stupid. And because we cannot pinpoint very well what the real root of the problem is, we can tend to take on these characteristics and believe what these people are saying. This can come from teachers or parents and people who genuinely want us to do good, but the way that it comes across can really affect our self-esteem. And when it gets repeated by so many people, we really start to believe it. And I think it kind of starts to snowball the effects of the ADHD because we believe it, we accept it, and we just think, oh, we're just irresponsible. We just don't know how to focus. And it kind of reframes our mindset into a negative thinking one, and it can make it a lot worse. This is one reason why I want to help spread awareness about ADHD and educate ADHDers on the effects of it, so that we truly know that we're not failing to think in the right way, we're just thinking in a different way. Now there's kind of two main types of ADHD. There's hyperactive type and inattentive type. So this means that it can present in different ways in children. Maybe you weren't hyperactive and maybe you weren't seen as annoying. Maybe you were seen more as a daydreamer and you were the one sitting in the corner with a book by yourself. There's different ways that this can present, and I can go more in detail on that in another video. Later, I'll be uploading a video specifically on executive dysfunction where I can elaborate further on what this is, because I think this is a huge component on how ADHD can affect adults. If you want to hear more of a list of common ADHD traits, I recommend you go back to my ADHD and autism video. I talk about the similarities, differences, and some overlaps. So that's just a little bit of an understanding of what ADHD is, and I'm going to specify more on these specific topics in other videos. I just don't want to make a long video with a whole bunch of information and just throw it at your face. I think it's best if we can kind of break it down. As always, thanks for watching my video, and expect more videos on ADHD to come.